Welcome back to another Coffee with Developers. Today I've got a very interesting person with me. I'm here with Steve Cistulli, who is the CEO of Apostrophe. Apostrophe you might not heard of yet, but you should and probably might be interested in seeing what they're doing. My big problem is right now that we all got these mobile phones. We're all very addicted to these mobile phones and we love our social media. The only problem is that a lot of our data goes in there that we don't know about. The microphone is always on. The camera sometimes takes things and sends them somewhere that we don't know. We are not in control of our data flow on these devices. When I worked in Mozilla, I worked on Firefox OS and I wanted to have a completely open operating system. Then I looked at Nokia Sailfish, or was it just Sailfish? Doesn't matter. Then Tizen, all these operating systems that offered like more insight into what's happening on your mobile device and where your data goes. And none of them succeeded. In the end, it looked like there's only space for two people, Android and iOS. And even Microsoft failed to break the market. So I'm very interested in what Apostrophe is doing to bring more data governance to the end user itself. And basically, why don't you just introduce Apostrophe and what the platform does for you?
Okay, very good. Thank you, Christian. Nice to be here today. So, Apostrophe is a Swiss-based company with headquarters in Lugano and a significant number of team members up in Bern as well as in Zurich, along with other parts of the world. Apostrophe is a full end-to-end smartphone ecosystem, which includes both the operating system, which goes onto the mobile devices, as well as all of the necessary services which actually make a mobile device, a mobile smartphone, work. The key premise of Apostrophe is to say, how can we have a data private smartphone experience without including companies like Google or Apple or Amazon or Meta, and have more control over how we allow our data out of that device. And so that's a brief overview of what the Apostrophe ecosystem is all about.
So how can I think of that? Like right now, when I turn on my phone or install a phone, an Android phone, it asks me immediately, do you want to connect to Google services? The Apple phone asks me, do you want to send data back in case the machine crashes? What would be the experience that when an Apostrophe device, when I turn that one on, what would be the first steps there? Is it a software as a service package? Do I still have to sign into something, or is it just encrypted from the get-go?
A few things. Let's start the conversation and let me back up for a minute. When we speak about Apostrophe, we always reference the four P's: people, privacy, planet, and productivity. And so that in our conversation today, when we talk about one of the features of either the operating system, the services, or the overall user's experience, it should fit into one of the categories of one of those four P's. So let's start there. Number one. Number two, when we start the phone up, imagine a world, which by the way does not exist today, but imagine a world where when you start that phone, the relationship between you and the device in your hand is strictly between you and that device and your ISP in many cases, or your carrier in those cases. When that phone starts up, you have the option to go back into the Apostrophe servers to have that device validated so that you can use all of the services that Apostrophe offers, which we'll talk about in a second. Or you can say, I'd like to bypass all of the Apostrophe services and just use this mobile phone as a standalone ecosystem. And because we are based on GrapheneOS, you understand that most, if not all, of the elements that Google have put in at the system level have essentially been removed. Yeah. And so you can use the device fully standalone without any of the Apostrophe services, understanding that it's based fully on GrapheneOS, or you can use it in conjunction with the Apostrophe services, which then give you access to a full backend of Swiss-based data sovereign PIM services such as email, contacts, calendar, etc., use of the VPN, which is built into the device itself, among other things that we'll chat about today.
So The VPN experience is out of the box because right now I'm using my Android with Malvat VPN. So I basically I spend my phone, I pay Google, and I pay a VPN provider that is somewhere else to actually start using that. So a VPN service is part of this, or is it something that you have to pay extra for?
It is part of the service. And what do you mean the service, Steve? Well, what we've decided to do is rather than work in the standard model of how Google or Apple works today, which is to give you all of these services and experiences for what seems to be free, rather than monetize the data that we are creating and generating and sending back to those companies, we charge a small monthly fee, about the price of a Netflix subscription per month, if you will. And that gives you access to your own private email, calendar, contacts, tasks, along with the VPN service, and then the other things that are not always that obvious to end users in the smartphone ecosystem. That includes software OTA updates, all being hosted and controlled out of Switzerland. It includes things such as 204 gateway pinging, which is common in every device that's out on the market today. And I think if you were to take a look at something as trivial as that, you would see that that doesn't always go back to a location where you would expect it to go back to. And so, yeah, VPN is a part of that broader package along with all of the other services. And again, for a small monthly fee, you have access to all that, knowing that your data is not going back to a large corporation to be monetized against you.
Mm-hmm. Um, I hope there's something if it was okay with the recording because I just started a video and it was in my headphones, but I hope it didn't record. So if it did, we're going to edit it. Don't worry about that. It's an interesting one because you talked about GrapheneOS, and I tried to actually flash it on one of my older devices, and it felt like installing Linux in the back in the days. Like it's a very geeky and very hard to do thing. So, in terms of the when it comes to Apostrophe OS, is there something like that as well? Is it more or less focused on the end user that you do the services for you, or is there also a developer experience where I can actually try the thing out somewhere else in a device or in a simulated device, or is it a service for now that we just can use rather than just contribute to?
This is part of the one of the P's, if you will, related to productivity. When you take a look at our community, if you will, I think any of us can take these devices. We can flash on a Graphene OS or a Lineage or an eFoundation, et cetera, and we could be on our way. A majority of people within the bell curve cannot do that. And so, what we've done is within the Apostrophe user experience, those elements that we put on top of Graphene OS as part of the user's experience, we do provide something called a GMS wizard. And so, because the key components for GSF are not on the device by default, we do have our own Apostrophe application store, which is based on F-Droid. You can easily connect your own repos as well as use the applications that we put on there, which are very secure. And we'll talk about those in a second as well. But getting back to the GMS wizard, if indeed you do want to connect your product to your old Google applications, you want to continue to use WhatsApp, you want to continue to use Candy Crush. I know you're a big fan of Candy Crush, Christian. And so, being able to use applications that you're already used to just by clicking on this GMS wizard, we take care of everything in the background, downloading all the necessary files, and then using the sandboxing techniques that have been put in place by Graphene OS to ensure that you are working in this bubble wrap environment with your old applications. Yes, you still have to sign up to the terms and conditions of each of those applications, but there's no longer this feeling of carte blanche where Google has access to everything at the system level and understands what's happening across your entire ecosystem. Everybody is going to be required to play very nicely within those sandboxed environments. And for the majority of people within the distribution curve, the GMS wizard is there under that category of productivity so that you can get back into your Google world if indeed you'd like to.
Hmm. So I like that the most, like, because the other programs, the other operating systems that I played with all failed because the apps weren't there, or I already had spent years and years of in Gmail and in other systems, and I want to keep accessing them because I actually have my phone with me and I'm used to that. So I assume that basically I saw the experience on the on one of the demo devices already, where you switch over and you go from from the Apostrophe OS into just an Android, and it basically looks like it, feels like it, does the same things, but it's sandboxed and it doesn't get to your rest of your data. It feels very useful to start with a Gmail account or with a Microsoft account, but it's amazing how much data gets sent between different Android apps and the login system of the operating system itself. So that's the thing where you're putting a spanner in the works, and you say, like, you can have the experience of Android, but you're not actually getting all your data there. These devices or the different apps have to ask for every single piece of information.
That's right. And so we further have simplified the user's experience. We've done that in a few ways. Let me explain some of them. Uh, we really wanted to allow people to understand on a daily basis that there are two worlds that you can live in. One is this home persona, which when you walk into your home, you should have a sense of privacy, right? No uninvited guests. And we call that the Domus, or this home persona. And within this new screen, you have it's black and white and grayscale. And any application that's on this home screen cannot be modified. It is an application that Apostrophe has created on top of and integrated with GrapheneOS to ensure its integrity from beginning to end. But when you do swipe over into this public persona, or Piazza as we call it, it's a normal Android experience. And then further, you can add in the Google Play Store if you'd like for sandboxing. And so you have access to many of the traditional non-GMS based applications that are available through F-Droid, as I noted, connecting in our store along with your own repos if you'd like to. We use only industry standards and mostly open source software, whether it's from IMAP or SMTP or DAVX. Everything is very, very standard back at our servers and therefore very, very standard on the phone itself. And so, even from a developer's community point of view, in the next few months, we will be opening up a website for developers, which is to say, if it works on a Graphene OS architecture, it will most likely work on our device. However, we will be providing all of the documentation about what we do with our store, with Digital Nomad, which is the VPN service, with our account manager, etc. We are advocates for the free and open source software, and all of the software that we do create that is not the property of any of the handset makers will be up in our own repos for people to look at and make modifications to if they'd like to, as well as work directly with the Apostrophe team.
Cool. What kind of skill set do you need? It's basically Java, Android, or other
E-
platform technologies as well?
Exactly. No, no, exactly. As long as you're fully understanding of Java, Kotlin, then you're going to be in very, very good shape.
Mhm. In terms of the services provided by Apostrophe and also the other platform players, I mean, I always have this discussion with people when they say Android or iOS, and they're like, okay, I love that in Android I have like endless photo storage with Google, but at the same time everything is indexed. Whereas like you pay for every kilobyte and on an Apple device, but it's private, as they say. So is something like that in there as well? You said the services it provides the out of the box is like the messaging services, messages, email, calendar. Is there also photo storage, encrypted photo storage, or something like that, sort of, or is it not in yet?
There is. So every account comes with 5 gigabytes of storage out of the box. Each of the mechanisms has a slider associated with it. So after the fact, you can increase your storage. The VPN service out of the box launches across 3 time zones. So it will be Germany, Japan, and the United States, covering 3 major time zones. And with a slider mechanism, you can say, well, look, I'd like more countries. I'd like Italy. I'd like uh, Chile, et cetera, et cetera. So the availability for flexibility is built into the system. Now, caveat, having said that, it's taken us years to both architect and implement the platforms that we're working on, right? It's an understanding of the operating system, all of the changes and additions to the operating system. And then it's the architecture and the implementation of the services side of the equation. Imagine every service that has been offered by Google that allows a smartphone to work somewhere on this planet had to be replicated. And that's non trivial. And so that's what's taken us these years. And so on these first releases that are coming out, and now with the Punkt MCO2, which is the first phone to actually get this software, you'll see that it is a version 1 and there's a lot of work to be done. And so when you look at the level below the user interface, you're going to say, oh, this looks very familiar. You guys are using Canine Mail as your email client on the device. Yes, it's a wonderful open source,
Hmm.
very well tested product, and that's what is being used there, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And as time goes on, which is the wonder of software, we'll continue to enhance each of the applications, make the system more robust, both on the OS as well as the server side. Final note, on the services, in addition to things like OTA and 204 pinging, VPN, DNS, etc., we've also implemented Mozilla location services so that there is location services also available and all controlled through the servers that are all located in Switzerland. So all of your data is located there once you do sign up for the service, and all of our servers are located there. None of our equipment is uh, from out of the country. There are no foreign companies involved with this project. It is strictly a Swiss based set of equipment. Everything is being built and maintained out of Switzerland.
Mhm. But I do have full access to my data. So if I wanted to, I'm unhappy with the experience. I can get all my data out again, right? It's not like
Yes,
you're
yes, you
gonna keep
can.
it.
Yes, you can. And we've taken great care to ensure that Apostrophe never knows anything about uh, the personal account or the person's data or the person's charging information. We've gone through great lengths to ensure that only the OEM will have access to, for example, IMEI related information and how that checks into our servers. We've put processes and software in place, even at the factory level, for our OEM vendors, because we only work with OEM vendors, to ensure that when that phone starts up, the phone can check into the Apostrophe servers, but Apostrophe themselves will never know the IMEI numbers. They'll never know anything about that person, just that that phone is indeed allowed to be on our network.
Hmm. One thing that always comes to mind when you hear about these devices, and I talk to other people in your company, and I'm like, it sounds like a very expensive burner phone. But that's not the idea behind that. I mean, same with like Proton Mail. You see it in every movie. Is like when there's a hacker involved, it's a Proton Mail email. And I used Proton VPN for years as well for non-nefarious purposes. So when it comes to selling an idea as a privacy phone or as a phone where you're in control of your data, um, let's turn it around. What is the audience that you think is you would love to access here? Like, who is this phone for? Because I think in a one-on-one comparison with a brand new iPhone or a brand new high-end Android, it will feel not as fancy and not as great. But what does it give you? Who do you think will be the people that actually want to have a device like?
This, the entire concept of Apostrophe was created uh, to speak to a new generation, believe it or not. The way of thinking of these older companies, which is to take advantage of the data go with an advertising based model is no longer the way of the future, right? So there is a younger generation that understands data privacy matters. Uh, Data is something that is very personal, and they should have the choice. And it's coming down to exactly that word, choice. As we were talking offline about other operating systems that many people wouldn't even remember the names of anymore. We need a choice for the future, and a younger generation who understands and have grown up fully digital definitely get it. And so this operating system, this ecosystem is targeted towards people who say, look, I want all of my applications. I want the ability to control who sees my data and how I'd like to barter with my own data. And then finally, we understand that Apostrophe cares also about the planet. And so we've added elements into this where you can begin to understand and educate yourself about the impact of what you're doing as you're using certain applications. And so from a demographic point of view, we're going for a much younger generation who can begin to use this type of operating system. In the meantime, there's also a very large audience who already gets it. If you think about it this way, Christian, there is a group, kind of these, these BlackBerry faithful people, right? Who already understand the importance of data privacy and what does it mean to ensure that when I'm sending you a message, the only two endpoints being humans are the trouble spots, right? But the data in between, in terms of how it's originated and then how it's stored, can no longer be a part of that equation. And so that's what we remove, right? We remove that ambiguity and say, look, from the moment that the data has been created on that phone, for the first time in a very long time, a company in two companies in California can no longer control how that data was generated or how it makes it to an endpoint. You now have that control and hence choice. So those are the demographics we're going after in the near term. And certainly in the long term, we need to take everyone in the middle of the bell curve and eventually move them over with this concept of choice.
Hmm. How can you said about thinking about the environment, and I think I saw a preview of that one. There is a way that actually shows you which app are using how much electricity, and you can actually target it according to that, and it's tied with CO2 emissions, or what was that about? I only saw a preview of that.
It is. So when the phone launches, people will be able to see that we've simplified the user experience as it relates to both your data privacy control as well as what we call, your carbon impact. And so we've put these two very large dials on your phone where, from a data privacy point of view, you can dial from level 1 to level 5. And really, what's happening in the background is it's setting the permissions accordingly so that you know you're either less private or more private without having to understand the hundreds of settings that normally go along with that. That's been put there because on a daily basis, we don't remind ourselves that we could be more private or less private as needed. And so the same thing with carbon impact. We said, what's an effective way to help educate people on a daily basis, on a per application basis, what their impact is on the environment? And so in these evolutionary steps, we have settings between 1 and 3 where you can say, look, I need to get stuff done. At this point in time, my carbon impact is not going to be that important. And so I want my email attachments absolutely downloaded to my phone, even if it's megabytes and megabytes and megabytes. And you and I know that by doing these downloads, you are impacting more and more and more, especially when you multiply that times millions and millions of users. And so in real time, we have a chart and there's a bit of a gamification to it where it says, look, I've been doom scrolling all day on either Insta or TikTok or whatever, and it shows you on a day by day basis what you've been doing and how you're impacting the planet. In the first iterations, it's a very simple algorithm that does these calculations. And as we move into next year, we bring into the calculation the server farms that are being used by the individual companies who are running these applications, such as Meta and Google, et cetera. We apply these factors, and then you can see what your real impact is. And so your carbon footprint can now be offset by what is called the carbon handprint, right? What are you doing as an individual with your carbon handprint to offset the negative carbon footprint?
Yeah, I mean, I did when I worked on Microsoft Edge, we did something for a developer tool similar to Hack Day, and we would basically show a carbon emission thing, like how heavy is this site. And yeah, it always failed at like the server side. We saw what your machine was doing and how much power it used, but the data that you got from the server was not part of the equation. So that's something that's really hard to calculate, and it's really easy to come across as greenwashing if you make excitement happen. But it's also interesting to be transparent about how that's calculated and how it means. iOS, I think, in the new version has something where you can actually dial down your social interaction, and you say like it gives you warnings when you use TikTok more than 10 minutes, and then says like, do you want another minute? These kind of things. It seems like there is a consciousness growing, or it might be being afraid of being sued. That might be the other thing that drives these kind of features. But it's great to see that this is already part of an operating system as well, and not just part of the Android level thing. The
Yeah,
Android, yeah, okay,
I was going to say, and we make it easy, and we try to make it fun with the user experience. When you get a hold of the software for any application that you download onto your screens, you just press and hold it. It's called the ledger, and you hit the ledger, and you now have a control panel with your dials and your usage, and it's actually fun. You want to interact with it, and so you learn by looking, and you say, well, look, I had meetings all week, or I was traveling here and here, and I really didn't do so much usage. But here I am on the weekend, and now I have just been doing everything, and this is not right. And then you talk to your friends, and you say, hey, look, I got a 55 on this particular day for this particular application, and they say, well, I got a 40 consistently. So let's get better together. Let's learn together. And when you look at the youngest generation who are adopting mobile technology, as noted, they get it. They're smart. They're smarter than most of us. And they need these tools to be able to live their best lives. And so, again, Apostrophe really tries to take into account privacy in general. No unwelcome guests in your house. Feel good about using your phone and walking down the street and knowing that you're not being tracked. That's number one. And then the planet. Understand that there's an operating system out there that does care and is going to give you the tools to educate yourself on what you are doing with each of your applications. And then productivity. We get it. The application community is really in this Google Play Store. We make it very easy for anybody to use the GMS wizard and put the Play Store on, but you're going to be bubble wrapped. And by the way, Christian, we put the name wizard after GMS, so you know it's got to be good, right? It's magical.
yeah, super 90s. Yeah, it's like the wizard will
Exactly.
now install your software for you.
Exactly.
Um, it's the only thing that I'm wondering about is the updates to the operating system. Like, I mean, I always have a Google phone, basically because I got them for free back in the days, and I always loved my Android experience there. And then I got a Samsung phone from my last company, and all of a sudden Android looked completely different, and the updates were sparsely coming in and very gatekeepery from Samsung. And all of a sudden I had like 10,000 apps in my Android that I didn't want to have, much like I have apps now on every operating system that I can't delete and I would love to delete because I don't want them. I don't care about the stock app on my Mac, for example, but they all come with that. So the Android experience in the Apostrophe or in the Punkt phone in this case right now, how often does that update, and how far behind is it the current versions of what Google throws out?
So this will still be OEM dependent, but let me make a few comments on what you noted. So letter upgrades as we used to know them, now major number upgrades as we know them now, are all under the control still of the OEM, because we work with the OEMs ensuring that the BSPs are proper. We do full integration on a per device basis, and then do the releases. So, with the OEM's commitment for multi-year updates, we're on board fully to support them. When it comes to security updates, we have obviously our own internal teams who are looking at security updates on a week by week basis, and we'll release those to the OEM for their ability to put them on the OTA server. And then we advise them to say these are either mandatory or recommended, etc. And so that's on an ongoing basis. The part about what's being preloaded is almost nothing. If you take a look at somebody who thinks they're loading a stock Android device built themselves, we're less than that. We go in and remove, and then we remove even more. We're very, very conscious about what's being loaded onto that device, memory utilization. And I've been running this particular device, the Punkt MCO2 that's being launched, as my daily driver now. Performance is always maintained. So despite the fact that I have put the Google Play Store on here, I've downloaded many very heavy applications, if you will. It's really amazing when you don't have the intermingling between what Google sees amongst all of your applications. You'd be amazed at how much quicker your device is. And so we launch very unloaded, almost no preloads. And almost as a joke, even the keyboard has to be very specific, because we will not allow the Google keyboard to be put on this device and preloaded. So you're always looking for other solutions. So it's an extraordinarily lightweight yet very, very powerful implementation.
It's pretty amazing how many people don't realize how much data you give away with a keyboard. I remember when the operating system keyboards were still very rudimentary, and then everybody did like SwiftKey, and then there were like thousands of Chinese copies of SwiftKey that had like all kind of stuff going on in the background. And you basically you give all your data away by writing it into it. You literally write your data into a service that you don't know, and nobody takes a look at where a keyboard puts the data, except for the people that create the operating system.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of taking this device now and using it out of box. It's really amazing when you use it for the first time and you understand what's not happening. You're not being tracked. No one cares about what you're doing in your data. If you're using the Apostrophe email system and services, no one's looking at that data, cross-correlating, extracting metadata, and then doing something with it to monetize you. There are no uninvited guests when we talk about Apostrophe, and it's a very interesting and very freeing experience the first time you're going to use it, for sure. Look, people have said, they say, hey, Steve, how are we going to do voice? Because I like to speak into my text messages because I no longer want to type. It's way too much to type. I get it. So we work with others in the developers community, and on our store, call them staff picks, if you will. But these applications that we put up there have been fully vetted. We use them on a daily basis, and they're non-Google oriented services. And in this case, Futo as an example, right? You don't need to be online. There's no Google interaction. Your information is not being sent off to a server. Everything's very local on your phone, and you still have a wonderful service. And so we're slowly helping people understand that there are alternatives to all of your data going across the internet. And again, that speaks to the power in the engine and the RAM utilization on the device. If you're not always making an internet connection, sending data back and having it come back down, you're going to have a much better user experience ultimately. And that's what I've personally experienced using this device as a daily driver now.
Mm-hmm. What are things that are missing? Let's talk about the warts as well. Can I use, for example, virtual SIM cards, or does it have to be physical SIM cards in the device?
So this is a two-pronged story. On the device that's being launched here very soon, it is two physical SIM cards. The operating system does support eSIM. There is another device in the works, and it has one physical SIM and one eSIM. The challenge is that when you first get a hold of this device, and this is a 2024 later device that we're talking about today from someone different. Um, at first, you take a look at the driver level software, and then you take a look at the application level software as it relates to eSIM. And immediately you say, well, you have a lot of, GSF dependencies. So things need to be rewritten. And so we've gone through that trouble with the eSIM providers to ensure that both the driver level software as well as the application level software have been modified not to use any Google services. So they are supported, but they'll be supported in future devices. Yeah, so these devices do have NFC built in. So far, our testing has shown that we're able to make payments properly that way. We've not tested all conditions around the world, but certainly the OEMs are doing a lot of their own testing in that regard. The testing that we've done shows that everything is working okay. We Once we start opening up the developer program a bit more properly in 2024, we will be allowing special access to certain elements of the operating system that banking applications might need access to, especially from a geolocal point of view. Many POS require both a physical as well as digital association, right? And so as we move into 2024 and open up the developer programs, we'll start to see more specialized use of the APIs on the operating system for any applications that we might be missing. Today, we've not seen any, but we know that as security becomes tighter and tighter with many of the banking or other POS applications for payments, we also need to adjust, and that's been built into our plans for our developer program.
Cool. Um, One thing also I wondered about, like, is there a way to import data from another Android? Is there a way to actually import data from Google Gmail to get it in there? Because I've got thousands of contacts. I would love to free them and make them more private, but I don't
Yes.
want to start from scratch again. Maybe that's
Yeah,
the idea, but
everything is standard for us. Uh, you know, all industry standards are being held. And so you can do any kind of a CSV export of your Gmail, of your Outlook. You can import it into the Apostrophe set of contacts if you'd like to do it that way. You could download Gmail onto the phone and use Gmail on your device if you'd really like to do it that way, or any other calendar um, or email program. So there are no limitations. We've stuck to DAVX and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Everything is very industry standard, probably more so than many other platforms. As a matter of fact, there's one example. The founder of Punkt, Peter Nevi, he has thousands of contacts that he utilizes through his MPO2 that you were showing earlier, their small feature phone device, and he uses Outlook. And so he was the first one, and probably the most extreme, exactly, and probably the most extreme case of the sheer number of contacts that he's imported over into his Apostrophe account. And because software is magic, it magically just appears on your phone, and it's really wonderful to see that their interoperability is there. And there's nothing really special when it comes to the interfaces. We've stuck to the industry standards.
Mhm. Um, So when you want to know more about Apostrophe, where can you go? Where can you find out about it? And what do you want from people? What can I mean? You've got thousands of developers now listening. Well, later on when it's recording is coming out, what can they help you with, or how would you contribute?
There's a few things. Let me give a few links first. The way that Apostrophe has set itself up is we're trying to service both the masses, the OEMs, and the developer community. And because of that, we also have several um, additional websites broken off to manage the services. So everything we do is shortened to APHY or AFI, as it's called. If you'd like to see the consumer facing side of Apostrophe, that's afi.io, quite simply. And you could learn a little bit about it. You can take a look at all of the screenshots that we currently have on the device today. And so if you visit afi.io, I encourage you to go there, look at the screenshots, ask questions about what you see or what you might not see related to those screenshots. If you'd like to look at the services themselves and you'd like to sign up for those services independent of having an Apostrophe device, you can go to afi.app. So afi.app are where our actual servers or services are being hosted. That's where you would sign into your webmail, into your contacts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then once you are on afi.app, you'll have access to a KB. So we maintain an active knowledge base on afi.app, and many of the more technical questions related to the services and the interfaces are on this knowledge base, which can be accessed through afi.app. In the coming months, we will be opening up our afi.guide, and this afi.guide website will be where we are posting all of our documentation specifically for developers. So you can see things like our naming and numbering conventions. You can look at the architecture of how things are put together. You can look at the details around Digital Nomad, our implementation of WireGuard, et cetera, et cetera. It will all be there. What we ask is take a look, have an open mind, understand that it's a process and it's taken us years to both architect and implement a platform, as well as work with OEMs to begin product development as well. And so, two very, very difficult things to do together. And we're very excited that now we're launching the Punkt MCO2 with the Punkt team also in Switzerland. And so I would encourage people to also go to the punkt.ch website, take a look at the specs of the MCO2, put it together with the screenshots that you could find on afi.io, as well as at the Punkt website, and begin to put two and two together, because when you get the device, you're going to have more questions, and those questions can be sent to info@afi.io.
Cool. I got Gmail at christianheilmann.com, which is also a nice email to set up. So, and yeah, I will get a device. I will take a look at it. And if you meet me at some conference or at some web developer or WeAreDeveloper meetups, we're going to take a look there as well. And it's an interesting concept. I wish you a lot of luck because it's a tricky idea, but I love that you're actually getting into the next generation of people. You're not trying to actually make people take their iPhones and their Androids away from them, but you're offering an opportunity to change the ways from the get go right now. And I also think it's good that there's, I mean, the device. I mean, can we say the cost point right now? What's the Punk device going to be like?
I'm looking at my screen here. I'm currently in the United States. It's showing me 749 US, and I'd like to, if you don't mind, take a second to talk about that.
Okay, because that's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money. Um, there's always the but. The apostrophe services are approximately 14.99 francs, 14.99 euros in that range per month. And so anywhere from 180 to 200 per year. That's already built in. Punkt is giving that to you for free as part of that. And so you are getting that first year of service, built into that price point. That's important to note, number one. But number two, and probably more importantly, and this is a bit intangible, but it certainly is relevant. Uh, would you be willing to spend even more money if you know that you can take ownership of your data back? Companies like Google and Apple only speak in terms of billions. There's a reason they use the term billions, right? And so I think 749, 800, 900, or 1,000 is a small price to pay versus what these larger companies are actually extracting from you for the price of your personal data. So I think it's a very reasonable price given what you are getting in terms of your freedom as a human being.
And it is a high-end device. It does the job. And as you said, like because the data in the background is not being harvested all the time, most of your CPU, GPU, and battery life is for the apps that you use rather than for the operating system to disseminate the data in the background.
Right.
Well, that was lovely. I'm really hoping to see that go places. I will also take a look at mine once it arrives, and we'll see what we can do with that. So, thanks very much for your time. We're quite over time, but it was interesting to hear. So, hopefully, the audience actually agrees. We're going to put the links that we talked about in the description as well, so you can use them there. You don't have to like and subscribe because we don't do that. So it's just going to be another coffee with developers soon with somebody else. And for now, thanks for Steve Cistulli for talking to us about Apostrophe OS and a new upcoming smartphone that is smarter with your data. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Christian.